G'day friends and fans, and welcome to Dave Talk Stuff Ukraine War Update for the 29th of September 2025. I'm your host, the author David Applegate, author of the books The Boyhood of Cade, Power Games, Into the Elsebound, and The Erotic Tales from the Empire, Part 1 available now. Before I begin, I'd like to thank all my sponsors, those who join my Patreon, buy my books, buy my merch. All my links are in the link tree. Now, I know a lot of people out there who watch the mainstream media are given the illusion that Russia refuses to negotiate and Russia's sitting there just pounding Ukraine casually, just killing women and children, while Ukraine, the helpless victim, is somehow winning this war. Obviously, the truth is somewhere between what Putin says and what Zelensky says. But however, one of the clearest lies told by Zelensky is not from him himself. Heck, it doesn't actually seem to originate from any one person in particular. It just seems to be something echoed by pro-Ukrainian channels and the pro-Ukrainian Western media in general. And that is, Putin is unwilling to negotiate. You hear it on Fox, you hear it on CNN, and you hear it on everywhere. And it seems to originate with the BBC and the Kiev Independent. It doesn't seem to actually come from Zelensky. Zelensky himself has, you could actually look the man up. However, he's often only speaking in Ukrainian, and most of his statements aren't on his X channel, which is weird. You'd think they would be, right? This is a man trying to convince you to go to war for him, and yet he's not upfront with you. Now, Russia has invited Zelensky to resume negotiations. We saw Zelensky yesterday refuse to respond, and now, again, he refuses to respond. This time, however, he responded with a drone attack on the Russian oil facility. Well, it says 2 days ago, but the thing is, Zelensky puts out an article in The Guardian saying that Russia's preparing to attack another European country, but the attack on Poland was that he claimed turned out to be a Ukrainian drone. Again, the media dropped that like a hot potato as soon as that found out it wasn't Russian. Otherwise, we'd hear never-ending stories about it, wouldn't we? Zelensky condemns Russia's violent cowardly. Yet, this isn't the only story. This is, however, this says 2 days old, but for the last 2 days, they have been attacking Russia. Russian oil refineries keep claiming that that'll cripple the Putin war machine. All it's doing is driving up the price of oil, of which the oil speculators, the king of oil speculators, BlackRock, is funding Ukraine and the European Union. Of course, never mind you're warned about debt and going into debt and who you go into debt with, and of course you have Jefferson warning about who you make alliances with, and it seems to go out the window. All these people, particularly Trump, all the way up to Trump, should be sounding the alarm on Zelensky. But for some reason, because I honestly think this is because of the European alliance and European trade partners. And you've already seen how willing some European countries are willing to rush to China. So don't think for a second Europe is our friend. It's just alignment of convenience, For now, it's convenient to be your friend. this fair weather friendship that the whole world runs on is creating a low trust society. But the problem is it's created by our media, which we should be able to shut down. But for some reason we can't. People keep saying, oh, the First Amendment. But if the media's lying to you, turn it off. It will die. But for some reason, people would rather watch the shit show than listen to the truth or even spread the truth. Now, I'm glad that sometimes more people tune in than other days. I get it. People are busy and they don't even tune in for long. I get it. You want the updates and that's about it. That's fine. All I ask is that you share this video out and actually spread the truth, because the truth will set you free. Now, this is strange damage to a building. You actually see an air conditioner intact, others blown off, and you ask yourself, how did this happen? Where's the building was bombed, where's the damage? And where's the light fixtures in this? Where's the light fixtures? Well, there are actually some you can see there's light fixtures, others are not. This is your typical Ukrainian poorly put together, poorly planned apartment. And look how small they are. What are they? These are barracks. And the glass has been blown out by a nearby explosion. You really think that's a look at it, big wide open doors, no privacy. Yeah, they're barracks. They call it a residential neighborhood. Really? Show us the rest. They won't. They can't. Because if they show you what's going on, you won't support it. This is how they manufacture consent, by feeding you just enough information to stir your imagination and then give you the panic stories about Russia killing women and children and tell you this is a residential. This is not a residence. Look at the windows. Big open windows, no privacy, no doors. Small bed, couple of chests. Why has it got 2 air conditioners? The air conditioners. And why has it got a hot water system without a sink? And why has it got a stove and a hot water system? What? Where's the fridge? This is your... If you've ever been to the third world, which I don't recommend you do, but at least like the second world, like Vietnam, Russia, Eastern Europe, you'll see a lot of places like this, poorly put together. Most of them are barrack style. So you see, quickly learn that this is a barracks. If you've ever, right? It is poorly put together, poorly designed. Probably, this is a cleaning contractor. Typical Slavic mafia in the sweatpants, you know. People obviously know, you know, that particularly contractors in the Eastern Europe, particularly government contractors, are all organised crime. Ukraine is a country. Ukraine is pointing the finger at Russia and saying organised crime, you know. Yeah, that's projection. But you look at these are poorly put together barracks. Wasteful government spending, putting in multiple air conditioners to pad out the expenses. Hot water system for what? For a basically to drip feed your hot water for a coffee. There's no proper sink, no proper kettle, an oven, because yet look at them. They're not all the same, but they're all got the same big, open hallway. That's a barracks. And I think I've said it too many times now. But you see, right? Panic over Russia firing drones and missiles. Russia says they didn't fire that many. They actually claim Ukraine shot down more than they fired. See, look, total of 595. Oh, but we shot. Yeah. Well, if they shut them all down, how did this building have its windows blown out? And we'll get to this, but how did all these explosions? Look at the damage. Saying a handful of Russian drones did this? That's probably a Russian missile. Hit that building probably in the middle and took out, literally blew the walls off buildings and blew out windows. But some of these stories, you actually start to notice 10 hours ago, that's the same, that's that from a different angle, and that's the same picture cropped differently. That's the same picture from a different angle earlier, cropped differently. They've cropped that. See, when they crop that out, there's multiple fires. That you say, what's down here burning? Vehicles stopped here. They probably put out some of the fires. What was hit in the middle here was probably an air defense unit, and when it exploded, you had multiple. Basically, that's why there's such a large secondary. Now, as far as I can tell, this is the initial explosion here. Following up, this is there's older photos of this. This actually occurred 48 hours ago. The initial story was put out 20 odd hours ago, 24 to 26 hours ago, and you get multiple angles of the same buildings, different angles. But you see, initial explosion and fire afterwards. Yet, when you look at the buildings, they're only scorched. Windows are blown out. Some of them have collapsed. More having to do with the poor structural integrity of the building. But yes, some of them were direct hit. But the indirect ones, you can see there's no spreading of the fire. Just the windows all blown out. Something was there that blew the living daylights out of that building. And the rest. And they're just showing the same picture over and over again now for 3 days. Of course, a lot of YouTubers put the same picture of Putin and the same photos of burning buildings. When you see them often enough, you go, wait a minute, I've seen this last week, and the week before, and the week before that. And soon you start to see the same glow fires. And you realise, wait a minute, was Russia hitting this same picture over and over again? Why is it, what's behind these buildings that they don't want to show that Russia keeps blowing up? I think it's a truck yard. I think trucks, I think this big empty space here is a parking lot, see? And this is the closest I get to it, is these trucks. Now, I don't know why Russia targets these truck parks. I suspect that these are just the cabs that go out and hook up to various artillery pieces or missile launchers and take them out with boxcars over the top, covered boxcars. Since Russia can't track them all, they track some of the trucks to the truck park and hit that. And of course, Zelensky isn't going to tell you that, but here, same again, same car park, yet again, same building. This is something was there, collapsed. No fire. Big explosion, but no fire. But there's no bedding, no furniture, nothing to suggest what was there even. No machinery, no white goods, nothing. They've stripped it of any identifying features before taking the picture. You'd see something landed on that roof and was taken away. Why would they do that? To give you the impression that it was a civilian area. Now, again, Ukraine's made threats and then said, that Russia's actually making threats. A Kremlin official just told Ukrainian president he knows where the bomb shelters are. I would believe that Russia is deliberately not targeting the Ukrainian government. Again, that's because if I was Putin and looking at the state of the war, I would say, heck man, Zelensky's my best friend. He's running Ukraine in the ground faster than I could. He's spending all this money on useless big weapon drones, most of which get shot down. He wastes millions shooting down Russian drones. Well, actually, are they really using F-16s or are they for show? Because according to some people, Ukraine's been frying yaks recently. And that's, by the way, I said this, that the best, that Ukraine has somehow been misled by stories of Britain. I'm not saying the British pilots weren't heroes, but the vast majority of German aircraft and German missiles, the V1, were shot down by British gunners on the ground. Most V1s were shot down by gunnery, not by air intercept. Now, we don't know much about the V2 other than it was sabotaged and what effect it would have had on the war if it wasn't sabotaged. But I think those stories have gotten in the Ukraine's head that they could do that to Russia. That if Little Britain, backed by all the might of the rest of the world's industry, could beat much bigger Germany, that Ukraine could do the same. And that Ukraine will come out big country. We will be big country. We will dominate Europe. It's like, I honestly could see that. I honestly could see that. If you've ever seen Zelensky speak and about how he's always got that artificial... If you look how before and after he became president, at some time, he suddenly gained 20 pounds of muscle. No, bro. He got implants, okay? He's a puffed poser. Probably got juiced like every other... Well, anyway, egomaniac. But we have reports of explosions, particularly all around Ukraine, its capital Kiev. But those, I believe, mostly are distractions. Like I said, I think the majority, particularly out here, are targeting aircraft. Russia knows the majority of drones aren't going to make it, but they're looking at it from an economic perspective. 500 drones, some make it, destroy one multi-million-dollar aircraft. That's one less multi-million aircraft that Ukraine... That's millions of dollars wasted. That's drained on the European economy. That slows down the war. We could point to many military examples. I think the biggest mistake Japanese made was building 2 battleships. Had they built 2 carriers and 1,000 Zeros, they would have brought America to a standstill and negotiated an end to the war in 1944. But when Truman saw the reports on the Battle of which was it Midway or Coral Sea? I knew it was Midway. Realizing the Japanese production was now falling, he realized that calling that total victory was achievable, though it was really his advisors. But I'm just saying, and this is what, again, if it wasn't for America backing, imagine America not backing Britain in World War II, it would have been over. They would have accepted in 40, maybe 41, maybe 42. That's why a lot of Brits were very worried at first and very upset that America came in late. But you've got to understand, and you look at the devastation, you can actually say, was it worth it? Particularly when they could have ended it at the start if they just acted in unison in the first place. But again, we see the same divisive politics where politicians want to score points and not do what's right. And we have Ukraine almost unanimously afraid of standing up to Ukraine's prime minister, or the prime minister standing and parliament standing up to the Ukrainian president, because they have no power. If they say anything that even remotely suggests that Ukraine is losing, they go to jail for life for aiding Russia. If they criticize the president, they go to jail for life for aiding Russia. Most of them don't last 6 months before they're tortured and killed. And the Ukrainians say, oh, they're killed by other prisoner. Yeah, for a cost of a steak. Ukraine is falling apart, and you can see it, though, yes, Russia hasn't made any advances here in Sumy. Russia hasn't made any advances here in Kharkiv. Well, nothing significant. They have, of course, they're still fighting in Kupiansk. Now we go to the Lyman area. Russia has advanced in the Lyman area, though Ukraine has not marked it off on the map. But however, they're still stuck here, and they've been stuck here for a while as well. They have taken a little bit of Zakharine after being stuck there for a long time. They've lost, and they're stuck here at Seversk for a long time as well, and stuck north of Seversk for a long time. But they have since, in the last supposedly 6 to 9 months, they've taken a lot of territory here. And they're pretty much north of Chavez Yar, nothing really significant. So it has emboldened Ukraine into believing, again, I believe this is Russia forging its borders, seeing exactly where they, how far they can push with limited resources, seeing what they can hold, and then using that holding position to keep lots of Ukrainians here. It's believed that there are 100,000 in each of these cities, although some stats put Kominsky only at 76,000 as of the latest casualties. But Russia is also grinding the Ukrainians. Instead of doing 10,000 casualties a week, they're only doing 2,000 to 3,000 a day. And it may not sound like much of a difference, but the more casualties you inflict on the enemy disproportionately increases the risk of your own casualties. We've seen this in World War II. Allies lost more soldiers. America lost more soldiers than Germany. Britain lost more soldiers than Germany. Russia lost way more. The price of victory was too high. Russia doesn't want to pay that price again. So they are fighting with less soldiers, more equipment per soldier, but still, overall, it's less soldiers, and they don't have the push, push, push mentality that was Soviet doctrine. This is not human waves. This is grinding. It is trench warfare. But it's not entrenched, if you can see the difference, where, artillery is mobile. But though they have pits, they fire. They may dig in for a few days, fire from positions, but once Ukrainian counter batteries start moving in, and they open up elsewhere, and then Ukrainians wondering, is that pit empty? Is that not empty? They're now firing from over there. They have no idea, because most of the drones Ukraine send over are jammed. Often it's weird. They've only managed to jam the camera, and you actually see the drones just flying overhead, and then a few moments later you hear the crash or whatever off camera. I don't know if that's propaganda or not, but it's often enough that I think the people on the front feel confident, and when they feel confident, pretty much that, if they're that confident, basically they've alerted, they've targeted the drone, and the drone has been successfully neutralized. But they don't always crash immediately. But if Ukrainian drones were that good, you would see Ukraine launching hundreds of drones at Russia, which they're not. Now, if Ukraine was winning, sure, they would be pushing back. And they wouldn't need to make false stories about liberating a town, which Russia has been nowhere near. Again, Russia is bogged down and has only made small gains here in the west, a little bit north of Seversk. Now, this might be a small gain here, might not be. Russia may have broken through, but it appears just to be the rendering. I don't think they've made any more progress here or here. They may have made more progress here, but it's just, again, it could be just a rendering. But the whole point of this spur was to bring up artillery and missiles to fire on these and also counter battery. But you remember, Russia is fighting with between 690 and 720,000. Ukraine is fighting with between 1.1 and 1.3 million, with 300,000 in reserve. Russia has nearly 2.4 million in reserve. So when you see the former Ukrainian deputy prime minister of Canada telling you that Russia's running out of manpower, she's smoking whatever Zelensky is crapping on the table. The leftovers of Zelensky's snorting campaign. But this is the problem with the West, is that Western people tend to believe Western media and have not realized how, even way back with the Vietnam War, how you were gaslit by a lying media. And if it wasn't for the violent left, things in the West, things would be much better. Now, Russia has not prepared a statement. Russia has announced that they will hear what Washington has to say about Tomahawk cruise missiles before they respond. That's as Dmitry Peskov in Russia was asked about Tomahawk missiles. They've heard statements. They have. They know that. that Zelensky wants them, and we know that America is prepared to sell some technologies to Europe. But I don't think anybody will turn around and say, yeah, you got to remember Iraq. How many did they use again? Over 1,000 just on Baghdad. You think you're going to give, let's see, 100 million a pop? 1,000 of them? That's why so you're going to give Zelensky $1 trillion in missiles so he can destroy Moscow? How do you think that will go down? People in Paris are going, why is the sun rising over London? And then basically, oh, wait, the sun's now rising over Berlin. You do realise that there's an easy way out of this. But it's just the fact that the left can't swallow their pride, and Trump's a prisoner of this NATO alliance bullshit, which America painted itself into a corner because some fuckwit can't tell the difference between humility and humble and being humiliated. But the EU, always complaining that Russia is a fascist state, that Putin's a dictator, must be taken down, and then Brussels turns around and says, we have to take away Hungary's voting rights because they won't vote the way we want them to. It's like you can't make this stuff up, right? You're not defending democracy, people. However, there is still a chance. Russia has not only put his hand out, the Russian president has not only put his hand out to Zelensky and says, can we call it quits yet? Putin has decided that, well, if Zelensky won't be talking to him, then perhaps we need to talk to Trump again. That is actually on the table. The public invitation has been made. Phone calls have been made. They want a frank and substantive and productive talks. The invitation still stands. Putin is willing to meet with President Trump, and it's now up to President Trump. Now, we have some responses from President Trump. Washington has insisted Kiev needs to give up certain territorial claims for a US-mediated peace deal. Trump has made somewhat of a U-turn, claiming Kiev could defeat, calling Moscow a paper tiger. However, at the White House earlier this week, Trump stated that he would not describe Russia as a paper tiger again and was not willing to use the term against anybody at all. So what we have is mixed messages. I think Trump's advisors made a cock-up, and then Trump has walked it back, and that the Kremlin has responded positively by Putin maintaining that he highly values Trump's efforts, describing the relationship as warm. Now, I think there's a couple of sticking points. I don't think we can get Russia to abandon Iran or North Korea or China, because right now Russia can't trust us. And Russia shares borders with these countries and has to deal with them on a daily basis. The best we can hope for is Russian neutrality, I think, and that still is a good thing. But it also depends whether or not Russia can live with, and I don't think we need Ukraine in the EU. I think it's a mistake. I think, however, that might be a signal by Russia EU membership for the liberation. That might be a tactic that if you want Ukraine that much, you have to surrender territories. Meanwhile, Zelensky's talking points are all about having Putin executed and all these other bullshit, Maximist, asking for $1 trillion, asking for Western air defenses and other stuff. I think Russian neutrality would be the best outcome, and trading partnership. the same way you have with China, a non-adversarial relationship. And if we downgrade, Russia from a potential adversary to neutral, that also stabilizes half of BRICS, and you'll actually stop the bleed, because a lot of countries will say, well, if they're willing to, and then say, well, the outliers like Colombia and Venezuela can pay the price, whereas Brazil, as long as they basically remain a democracy, I think they're fine. And you'll actually see there's a knock-on effect, right? And the last people in the world I expect to go to Russia was a UK journalist. I have given up on the UK and thinking that most of its journalists are so far left that they think Karl Marx is a fascist. Well, he is, but that's beside the point. They used to think the sun shined out of his glory hole, and they'd probably pay a $5 every year to go to his shrine to genuflect and then say, we're not in the cult! But James Dingipole, who doesn't seem to have much fame outside of his circle of friends, however, he is a British German journalist and somewhat commentator who has some standing in The Spectator as, I won't say reasonable. He's more of he's a left-leaning man, but he has an open mind, unlike most Western journalists. In his own words, he was invited to Moscow by the Russian Orthodox Patriarch. Everybody thinks he's mad, that it would be dangerous, that he'd be killed by the FSB or a drone. Others say that that'd be a useful idiot of the Putin. And that you're nothing but a stooge. Under communism, we weren't allowed to exist. Under Peter the Great, etc., But yeah. The thing is, his parents grew up in the Soviet Union, now live in France. The Western media's relentless negativity of Russia. And they haven't seen this much propaganda since the days of Brezhnev. And obviously, he's actually not naive. He actually believes the fact that he has a lot of things to say positive about Russia, but he also knows that most people aren't going to believe him. But the fact is, he went there, he found a country deep in spirituality and traditions, a clean country, a relatively low clean country, a high trust country, a very neighbourly, very positive country. People greeted him in the streets. They didn't treat him like a pariah. Now, one of the things that made Russia a pariah by the pro-EU authorities, that Western support, of course, is conservatives, gay marriage, LGBT. So, yeah, the Orthodox Church is facing oppression by pro-EU authorities, because the West supports the suppression of conservative religions, except for Islam. It totally goes after anybody who opposes gay marriage or LGBTQ. Now, many LGBT movements have thrown out the trans because of recent events. Finally sick and tired of the trans making everything about themselves. Most of the LGBT groups want to switch from, want to accept the rights, that they have the same rights as everybody else now, that they don't need to be anything more than a legal advocacy group to maintain those rights. Whereas the T, yes. Again, the journalist talks about being the recipient of genuine hospitality, and that he's not going to abandon anything anytime soon, and that the West is in danger of throwing out the baby with the bathwater, and it is greatly so. If you continue to write off Russia, you know, again, in the 90s, we had a offer of friendship. It was Clintons who exploited and then ruined that conflict by creating conflict where there was none. Hillary Clinton and her Russia, Russia, Russia narrative was all about her being a sore loser, expecting Putin's help to win an election, and which she was unwilling to interfere in. And so she created the narrative that he did. And then Bill said the quiet part out loud, but we helped you get elected. Which we don't know if that's true or not, but we do know Bill Clinton got Russian money and never got charged with any crime. So, sometime in the last 48 hours, Putin offered a peace deal and Zelensky condemned Russia as vile and attacked Russian oil, bragged about Russia being a paper tiger and backed by Trump saying, yeah, I think Ukraine could win. And then Russia shows them that you could be wrong. And of course, we now know from the few photographs and looking around the different photographs, and they're mostly all the same from the same angle, that here, that's Belgrade. You can see, that's a brickworks or a power plant. Not sure which. I think it's actually a brickworks. But Ukraine is not targeting Russian military. They're targeting the Russian economy. And Zelensky is just doing the bidding of Europe to destroy as much of the Russian economy as possible so that Europe can move in and buy it up cheap. This is economic vandalism disguised as war, and Russia's called it out. But you can see the initial explosions 20 hours ago all across. Look at the size of them, and then look at the blowout windows. You basically know Ukraine has lost something big again, and these trucks were most likely carrying artillery or shells or missiles, because Ukraine hasn't launched any large missiles. I would presume they were bringing in missiles from Britain. I mean, allegedly, because Britain claims, no, we're building. Britain seems to be every day, oh, we're building this for Ukraine, we're building drones, we're doing this, all this. And then the next hour say, oh, the Ukrainians, they're so resilient, they're so brilliant. Oh, look at them attacking Russia without any help. It's like bullshit. Why would you need to add the without any help part? When we know Poland's was paying their Starlink. I think the EU's taken that over. But I mean, again, you have, no matter what you search for, they're always going to sneak in something that doesn't belong. So it's very hard. But I'm sure others have spotted different things, like again, most of these places, where's the furniture? Where's the signs of life? Where's the large number of civilians that would be crowded around, crying or looking for loved ones or picking up remnants of their lives? Again, these large empty homes on the outskirts of Kiev suggest to me that they have a large transitory population, most likely mercenaries or foreign workers, working on drones in these small factories surrounded by old Soviet-style housing blocks like this. They're barracks or training centers or drone assemblies and their workers. Remember, when Zelensky attacks Russian oil facilities, they're not manned by military. They're civilians. So Zelensky's guilty of deliberately targeting civilians. So you can't say, but again, neither side is party to our morals or treaties. Ukraine is not our ally. They were China's ally. China abandoned them after the coup, and then the Western powers abandoned them after the Russian annex of Crimea, because Obama didn't want a war with Russia, which was actually one of the few rare times he actually made a sensible decision, realizing the fact that 70% of the population in Sevastopol alone are Russian, that it's home to over 1 million Russians. Crimea is not that big or populated. We know the British wanted it to get a foothold on the Black Sea oil. But again, Zelensky only cares about the oil here because apparently the Black Sea oil is this line here. This is the demarcation line between Crimea and this is the sea border, right? And that this here, as of sea, was split 60-40. It's now 0% to the Ukrainians, of course, and that's why Zelensky is pissed, because he's cut off from 10% of Ukraine's GDP. And remember, he's paid $384,000, folks. That's more than most governments around the world. Except for the US, I think that's 670,000 or 690,000. Trump donates his salary. He can't actually, he can do that, but you can't reject a salary. I mean, there's a lot of government workers on six-figure salaries, but nothing that high. But when a country with the average wage of $5,600 a year, the Ukrainian peso is worthless, so where's Zelensky getting all this money from? A country that struggles to generate $72 billion a year in so-called revenue, most of which comes from agriculture to the EU. Again, they were originally shipping to China and Russia. They were doing well for themselves. It's just Zelensky got lured, not Zelensky, sorry, Zelensky's predecessors got lured by the promise of EU money. The EU wanting to develop the Ukrainian economy, which, well, that doesn't sound too bad, and it sort of is a poke in the eye to Russia, but probably wouldn't have been such a poke in the eye if they didn't go after the ethnic Russians here. And I think once you understand that, how simple it is to end this, and it's just Ukraine's pride, particularly Zelensky. And don't forget, all these people who are saying, who's salivating over Ukraine, none of them go there, none of them live there. Most of these pro-Ukrainian channels, they're in Canada. Okay? And don't ask them what their grandfathers did in the war. They've heard the Hugo Boss. And that's where we're at. A chance for peace. If enough people could get the message out there, if enough people could like it, share it, subscribe, help get the message out there, pull the rug on Zelensky, the EU should put their foot down. This man is corrupt, this man is a warmonger, and Europe should not tolerate somebody with territorial ambitions whatsoever. Particularly Turkey, but that's a story for another day, because they'll maybe collapsing on their own weight anyway. As always, please support the channel. You can support me on Patreon. buy my books, buy my merch. All my links are in the link tree. You can find it in the description below, in my profile, or scan the QR code on the screen. Thank you to each and every one of you. I really appreciate you all, and see you in the next video, and bye for now.